how brilliant it is to keep seeing people show up for these things and to keep getting the feedback for it, and to, you know, to get the reinforcement that what we're trying to do here is adding some value. And as a recap, what we're actually trying to do here is just give you stuff each and every day to think about that you can take forward into your working life, whether you work for another business or whether you're running your own business, and that you can implement, or at least think about, I suppose, if not always directly implement. So this has been going now for quite a while, and we're going to keep it going for quite a while. And it's run by me and Martin. Martin, introduce yourself.
So my name's Martin Lucas. I run a business called Gap in the Matrix, and we're focused on front of market, so lots of strategy, behaviour change to do with growth, sales, marketing, advertising, that kind of stuff.
And my name is Phil Lewis. I'm the founder of a business called Corporate Punk, and we exist to make other businesses more resilient, responsive and innovative. And we're helping a lot of businesses do that at the moment, given some of the challenges that they are facing. And this initiative is part of all that as well. So this morning is going to be a little bit experimental, actually, and we are going to open the floor for some questions. Now, we've had a couple of fantastic emails overnight, so what we're going to do is go through, give you our take on the questions that were asked, and 2 questions that were asked. And so I'll give you my perspective, Martin will give you his perspective, and then we'll move on to the next question. What we were going to say, though, is if you've got other questions or if you've got comments on the things that we're saying, let's make this morning quite discursive. So please pop your thoughts into the chat, either for everybody, or if you've got specific questions you want to direct at Martin or at me, you can do so by just literally clicking where it says everybody and changing the name there. Basic IT lesson. Always good to deliver that. And the only other thing I wanted to say to you this morning is we really do appreciate people liking and sharing this content. So every day after about an hour after this webinar closes, we put the webinar up on YouTube, and we'll share a link to it on LinkedIn and occasionally, when I remember, on Twitter. So if you can do us all a favour, we'd really appreciate it. We don't ask for anything for these webinars, but we do want to ask for you to share and comment and like, because we're trying to help as many businesses as we possibly can. So the more we can reach, the more hopefully we can do that, and the more we can try and make other people's lives just a tiny bit easier in what was a very challenging time for many. So let's crack on. So we had a couple of questions. We said we make these questions anonymous, so we've kept to that. And particularly on the questions, we've also anonymised them a little bit further, just by sort of perhaps pulling them up and generalising them a little bit as well. So, so the first question is this: how do you think this global crisis will fundamentally change people's or businesses' attitudes, so people's business attitudes individually and collectively, and therefore what new problems can we help them solve? So how do you think the global crisis will change how people think and feel, both individually and collectively, about how they do business, and what new problems can we therefore help them solve? We being, I suppose, those of us who are in the business of helping other businesses in some way, shape or form. So I'll give you my take on this. Now, I wanted just to start this, my thoughts on this question with a bloody great big blinking neon caveat, which is, I was moaning about this actually on Twitter yesterday. So I have a lot of people pitching stuff at me for the column I write for Forbes, and I get a lot of future of work style pitches at the moment. You know, so and so has got a comment on future of work, and or how we're all going to be working together in a few years' time, and would you like to write an article about it? And the answer is no, I wouldn't like to write an article about it now, or indeed anytime soon. The reason being that, bluntly, you know, people are dying, people are extremely fearful, we're all in lockdown, the economy's in free fall, certain categories are really not going to be able to recover back to the kind of health that they enjoyed previously anytime soon. And it does not feel like the right time for me, or in fact for anybody, to be musing on about the future of work in that context. So I think there are answers to this question, but I just want to kind of say that I'm going to very specifically avoid kind of like future of work style stuff, because I'm just not sure that it's A, that helpful, and in fact B, that appropriate at this time. What I do think is that there will be some attitudinal shifts as a result of this. I think actually weirdly one of the major attitudinal shifts is actually contained within the question, which is the shift from the individual to the collective. So all the time what we see in history is when there's been great sort of crises, and great crises, whether those have been wars or whether they've been health related or whatever, people have a habit of pulling together and wanting to look after each other, rather than being quite individualistic. And I think I said this yesterday as well, but I think that poses really interesting questions for businesses that have always been about, and brands that have always been about helping the individuals to prosper. I also think that we'll probably enter a time where behaviour is going to become ever more scrutinised. So one of the things I would observe going through the crisis that we've been going through is that there's been some appallingly bad behaviour by certain businesses out there. Businesses that, can afford to pay their invoices but actually have just stopped doing so. Businesses that have furloughed their people, for example, an economic decision because they actually make more money that way, regardless of the damage perhaps that causes, or even businesses that had other options and have just decided to in some respects almost like punish their people. I mean, I don't think Richard Branson did his reputation any favours with some of the decisions he took over Virgin Atlantic, for example. So I think we're seeing some really genuinely bad behaviour, and that will come back to haunt businesses. I think we have every right to hold each other as a society to account for really good behavioural standards, and we have a right to demand from each other and demand from the organisations that look after us that they behave ethically, that they look after the people who work for them, that they spend their money in the right ways, and that they treat the money they receive and treat their customers in the right ways as well. And so I think that we're going to see coming out of this time a real scrutiny actually about those who did the right thing and those who did the wrong thing. And the final thing on that is to say there is a difference between those who do the right thing and on those who can't do the right thing. Do you see what I mean? Or those who do the wrong thing and those who can't do the right thing. So what I mean by that is, there are businesses out there that are legitimately really struggling to pay their invoices at the moment, and I think they deserve something of a hall pass compared to those who just won't. And my final point is about entrepreneurialism. So we're going to see a period now over the next few years where I think the rise of the entrepreneur is going to be huge. So as faith in traditional economic structures perhaps is shaken a little bit by this, as people think about how to provide for their families, and as people have got a lot more time on their hands than they've had historically, I think we will see a rise in entrepreneurialism, and we'll see a rise in new businesses, and in sort of a lot of businesses being started. And that was the true after the credit crunch in 2008, by the way. Number of businesses plummeted, the number of entrepreneurial businesses I think actually went up at that time. Saw a report on that a couple of weeks ago. So there's my thoughts: a shift from the individual to the collective, increasing scrutiny around who behaves well and who doesn't behave well, and entrepreneurialism as a thing. And then how do we help them? Very quickly, I think you would go, well, we can help businesses by understanding how to navigate through a world where culture is shifted from the individual to the collective in other ways. We need to be finding ways to help support entrepreneurs, I think is really, really important. And we can also help, I think, as well by calling out really good behaviour when we see it as well as bad behaviour. Martin.
So the great insights, by the way, Phil. I think that let me just run some variables that I'm seeing at the moment. So one example is we're writing a paper at the moment for one of the big UK banks. And we're looking at what the changing world was looking like before the crisis happened. And that was a rise in the need for trust and authenticity from big brands and small brands. So you had a lot of consumer kind of behavior change going on where people just wanted to understand a little bit more truth from brands. And I think that's definitely going to rise. I think that one of the biggest factors in terms of working styles and things like that is that what we'll probably see is a lot of people saying that everybody's going to be working from home in the future, and offices are going to be empty, and cities are going to be vacant spaces and things like that. And I think the reality of all of that, to Phil's point, is that I think trust and authenticity is going to rise. I think people are going to remember brands who did negative things. They might not remember what they did, but they'll remember the negative feeling associated with it. But I think the biggest change is going to depend on how long this lockdown lasts for. So, for example, if we come out of this lockdown, let's say at the end of May, it's not going to be long enough time for businesses to fundamentally change how they do things. So we'll get told to go back to the office, depending on what your work circumstances are. I don't think that will create systemic change. If the lockdown was to go on for, say, a period of 4, 5, 6 months, then I was chatting to a psychologist, one of our partners that we work with, and they were talking about this whole pandemic and the lockdown is kind of like a grieving process. And if you think about what that looks like, one of the challenges we've got at the moment is Phil and I are working on an article for his Forbes column at the moment about how it's affecting behaviour and causing some inertia for people at the moment. But my main point about what is going to happen is it depends on the duration of the lockdown. Because if we come out of the lockdown after 2 or 3 months, people are going to crave returning back to normal as quickly as possible. And I think that we'll consume a lot more and we'll travel a lot more, and then we might decrease what we're actually consuming a little bit more. And I think that what products and services mean to us will matter more. On a personal level, I really hope that we see more localization and more belief come from it. But at the moment, I think that there's a lot of variables, but I think it's too much for people to be able to say the future of work is going to change A, B, and C. I think that, I guess to your point, Phil, is a lot of people are just looking to use that as a vehicle to talk about what their agenda is about future of work and stuff like that as well. So I think that there will be change, but I think that for me, a lot of it will come down to the individual, and that could be the individual running a business, and it could be you as an individual. For me personally, I'm just looking at the world slightly differently. I've paused a lot of what I'm doing on a consumption level and buying less stuff. I just don't need as many things that I need to, and that's not a new insight for me. I think it's just come home to roost more because you're not out as much, right? So why do you need all these extra things? But again, I think that relates to the trust and authenticity, right? I think that's just my consumer behavior being brought home that was already in the midst of changing as 2020 began. I don't think it's necessarily the pandemic that's causing it. I think the pandemic is just enforcing it.
Absolutely agree with all that. Good. So that was a question one. Hopefully, some stuff to have a think about there. Let us crack on and talk about question 2. So we are currently furloughed. Getting business flowing again is obviously an important milestone for us, but as we currently have no idea when that will be, have you got any tips for how to plan to thrive in this scenario? Now, this question came from somebody who's actually working in the travel industry. And we've tried to pull it up a little bit in just this articulation for simplicity's sake as well, and also because there's some broader points that we want to make. But it is just worth knowing it came from somebody in the travel industry for whom the obvious opportunities to try and activate business at the moment are just simply not there. Martin, you may have some thoughts on this, I think.
Yeah, so let's split it apart in a few different industries, right? So you've obviously got the travel scenario, which means that if your business is within that, it depends on how you're going to react to that, because we live in a futureless language society. So psychologically, in the UK, along with most of Western Europe, most of our language is based on now. It's based on happening right at this moment. So it's very futureless. It's why as a society, it's much more difficult to get people in the UK and Germany and France to start saving, right? Because that's the basis of our language, is to be futureless. And what that means for travel is that when Trailfinders came out and started talking about February 2021 travel, which they did in the latter half of March, and then EasyJet did a similar thing, is that they're completely missing the point of what's going on in their customers' minds, which is that they don't feel particularly good about what's going on right now. And by trying to get people to think about the future and book travel for the future, it's just not going to happen. So my advice for the travel stuff is that Phil spoke about it with the last question, right? That I use the gladiator quote: whatever we do today is going to echo for an eternity, meaning that customers are going to remember the positive things that you give them to help them right now. So my advice for travel would be, if you're dealing with enterprise clients, then you can engage them about their overall role, right? Because enterprise travel people means that that's their complete role. So they're very open to being educated, a lot more knowledge. I think that will rise and rise, particularly after after Easter, when it becomes a lot clearer how long lockdown is going to be. I think for the smaller travel stuff, I think you can just, for smaller businesses, when you're serving SMEs and things like that, I think that you can just serve them with light, insightful helpfulness, and definitely look at what I call stories of success, which is no more than you've done something for a client and you share it to another client. On a very simple level, every time we win a piece of business, I put a post on LinkedIn celebrating it. Sometimes I can talk about the client and other times I can't. But what it does allow me to do is to have a conversation saying, we're serving this market, this is what we're doing, and then people contact me about it because it resonates with them. That's a sales activity, right? What I'm more talking about going on with the pandemic stuff is much more around helpfulness. So there's bound to be reasons why people buy your product, insights that you've got that you could share with them, what you believe is going to happen in the future, and different ways that you could help them. So it's a nice strategy to do with that. So that would be the travel stuff. If I was to then take retail, what we've been working on with retail clients is that's one that's obviously in major lockdown because your stores aren't open, but e-commerce and sales is actually increasing. And even if you're not just doing sales activity, this is the number one time where you can raise loyalty for people. And not the discount codes, not the program, not that, but the actual feeling of loyalty. So again, it's about helpfulness. There was a global brand that put out a message last week that their own foundation was donating 10% of sales to their foundation. And it didn't make any sense because nobody understood what the foundation was, and they were still asking their clients to buy money, to buy product to enable that donation. Whereas Lego came out and gave 50 million to help kids in a variety of different ways. So it depends how you look at the world. We've all got to still sell product where we can because that's how we survive, right? But I would never make that your dominant point, not in travel, not in retail. And then for people that have been furloughed in general, so they're still doing their jobs and things like that, I think it comes back to the rant that Phil and I were having just before 9 o'clock, which is to do with how you treat your staff and how you support them is probably just as important, if not more important, than just constantly thinking about your customer strategy. What do you think, Phil?
I mean, I think there's some great points in there. For me, if I was facing this sort of situation where my staff are furloughed, I don't know when I'm going to be able to pick up business again. I don't know, when, and actually, frankly, I'm not even quite sure how, because to Martin's earlier point, the amount of time that this period goes on for fundamentally affects what happens afterwards. Then it's a very, very tough situation to be in. And I think the first thing I would say is that I have every sympathy with you going through that, and really, really not an easy one. Where I might be inclined to go though would be perhaps to the classic sort of McKinsey model of Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3. So Horizon 1 refers to our business of today, Horizon 2 refers to our business of tomorrow, and Horizon 3 refers to our business of some indeterminate point in the future. And actually, at times like this, you might go, well, actually, the Horizon 1 business is basically, totally on pause at the moment. There's nothing we can do about it. And actually, even Horizon 2, because we don't know when we're coming out of this, we don't really know what the medium term would look like. It's hard to kind of plan for. And Horizon 3, though, what might we be? What might we be in the future? And I spoke yesterday about the importance of medium-term planning and answering those 7 questions, and that's Horizon 1 and 2 stuff. But if I really can't answer any of those questions at all at the moment, I want to focus on Horizon 3. So the way into Horizon 3 is to be able to think, if we weren't a travel business at all, or we weren't in this particular business model, what might we be? What is our way of being able to connect our unique value to the market and to the customers we serve, or perhaps some different customers than the ones that we've served historically, in completely new ways? If we had to start our business again tomorrow, would we even, work to the model that we've got at the moment, or would we actually work to a completely different model? If I'm just completely unconstrained by what I've got to deal with in the present moment, in the sense that the business is literally closed and we have no idea when we're going to be able to reopen, then actually the opportunity exists to think in completely open terms about how we might reinvent, unconstrained perhaps by the stresses and strains of running the business in the short term. Now that requires also somebody to be able to take a step back from worry, to take a step out of any kind of short to medium term management tasks, and to do the time for deep work. And again, I talked about deep work, I think a week or two ago, and I was talking about the opportunity that remote working presents. It's a classic deep work question, Horizon 3, what might our business be? So if we can create the space to have that, if we can create the time to have that quality of conversation about, if we weren't this kind of travel business or retail business, what might we be? Whether we do that on our own or whether we do that with clients, then new ideas can come out of that. And either those new ideas can be implemented, in the context of Horizon 1 or 2, it might just give us some additional ways into satisfying our existing customer need and it might actually give us some bolt-ons to our new business. It may also result in a completely different business going forward, a completely reinvented approach, a completely reinvigorated team, and an opportunity to engage with the market. So for me, as I said, not an easy situation to be in, but perhaps actually when you have literally no other option, it's the best time in the world to reinvent. And that's my take on that. Martin, I think we have a question.
Yeah, cool. So on attitude and entrepreneurialism, is there room once again for the core co-op business type model? So you're talking about like a one-time presence in every postcode, the local co-op aim to serve, help and connect its local community. So I think this is more of a question about localization and more, do we think there's an opportunity and will we return to more of that local service, local community type business and activity? What's your view, Phil?
Well, I think, I've felt for a while that in an increasingly digital world, physical things have more meaning. And that in a world where a lot of things have become global and commoditized, then actually sort of artisanal things have more meaning. And in a world where actually we can travel everywhere, that some sense of local identity is important to many people. It's less so for me, actually, to be honest with you, but I do recognise that's a need a lot of people have. So at the intersection of those things, absolutely, there's going to be a demand and a desire for increasing localization. And actually, I think there's those marketplace businesses like Truva, for example, and even to an extent, businesses like Farfetch that are about connecting independent businesses and boutiques with a often national or indeed global audience, are actually doing quite valuable work because it's harder and harder for people who are just bricks and mortar only, I should say, to make ends meet. So yes, I do think that there is an opportunity I think there will be a great demand for local businesses, and in that demand there will be increasing demand for support for those businesses. The challenge, of course, is to find ways of supporting those types of businesses which is economically viable for consultants, and at the same time perhaps that precipitates a shift to a different model. Perhaps again, online training, online resources, those sorts of things actually become more useful in the context where big hourly consultancy fees aren't that justifiable for much smaller business owners. Martin?
Yeah, no, it's great insights. It's a great question. My approach to anything to do with localization and community is, one, I think it's an opportunity before this pandemic happened. Two, I think certainly in the short term, there's a much bigger opportunity to lock into people's minds and give people that opportunity to feel that sense of community and that sense of local support. And what does that actually come down to? Because it's not about just being a small business that happens to have a store in the local area. It's some of the fundamentals of human behavior, right? Is that we'll respond much better to anything where we feel that a brand understands us, that we feel cared for, and that they serve us with more relevant experiences. So even global retail stores that are doing everything top down from a brand setup, you go into a store and it doesn't serve your local community because the store is not laid out with the stock and the products that actually matter more to that city. So if you think about any time that you've been to London and Manchester, people dress differently, right? It's got a different local feel to it. So there's an opportunity here for global businesses to localize, but for smaller businesses especially so, because the ability to make somebody feel cared for, understood, and to create relevant experiences is not that hard, but it is counterintuitive to how most people are taught about what business is and what to set it up. So I thought that was a great question. Just one more just come in, Phil. So
Okay. We've got a minute, haven't we? Yeah, okay.
yeah. In the absence of physical proximity of belonging, I think we'll see the rise of the importance of virtual communities. Whilst people who publish best-selling books or social influencers in the past held their collective respect and esteem, I see more followership happening from those that are actively creating and enabling positive online communities, hopefully like what we're doing, really. So the entrepreneurs that will emerge from this will be focused less on telling people what to do, but creating products, services, and insights that will show people how to do it. It echoes Martin's point of relevance and helpfulness. What's your thoughts about that, Phil?
I'll give you my thoughts in 10 seconds, which is advice is cheap, insight is priceless. Anybody can ignore advice. It's much, much harder to walk away from good quality insight. So regardless of what happens next, the idea of gurus and the idea of people having all the answers is actually never the right way to support another business anyway. What we should be focusing on is helping them have insights about how they want to work, and whether network virtually or not, I think it's, that is what good looks like for me.
Yeah, cool. I'll leave you with one final thought and then Phil can take us out and we can have a quick chat about tomorrow. So there was a philosopher back in the day called Lyotard that in the 50s said that the computer age would move us from the age of knowledge to the age of information. And I think we're about hitting that apex where people want more knowledge. They want support with things. And I think that's where quality is going to rise and rise. So I'm totally enforcing the point that you just made, Phil. I agree wholeheartedly. So take us out, Phil.
Good. So tomorrow's session is called Mind Hacks, Breaking Free of the Habit Loop. And the gains for that will be plenty of practical advice and insight around how to break existing negative habits and to create positive ones. That's going to be a great session that Martin's running for us tomorrow. As I said earlier on, please share. I will kiss your face if you share. It will be great. That was good, wasn't it? Do you like that? I'm not
that was amazing.
But yeah, I'll be very grateful if you would spread the word about what we're doing here in Recession Rebellion. And the plan, we meant to do it on Monday, events, dear boy, we will be publishing our schedule for the next 4 weeks. Anytime now. We've got some really interesting stuff coming up for you. And I just want to say thank you as ever for making the time, and we will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Thanks, folks.
All the best.